Republicans have been resistant to come back to the negotiating table with you. What is the message here from this group on this particular topic to them?
Freezing the taxes is terrible tax policy. It's terrible public policy. It's we're going to reverse some of the real progress that others have mentioned that we made in terms of reducing young people starting smoking and in terms of encouraging people who are smoking to quit. So it's terrible for Minnesota, and it's just very destructive to our fiscal stability in the future. Why would they do this? Who benefits from this? And what motivated them to make this one of their top priorities throughout the legislative session? Those are questions to ask them.
Signing the tax bill now that it's been a couple of weeks, do you wish you would have taken it down over things like this?
No, because we've been through this. That would have meant that our Commissioner of Revenue would be, and her whole 1,300 employees would be, unfunded as of July 1st. I mean, the legislature very intentionally set it up that I had no reasonable choice other than to sign the tax bill, and so they succeeded in that part.
You mentioned this was in the bill throughout the entire session. You all had significant negotiations with the legislature. How often did this come up? How insistent were they? And why was it in the final bill if this was so important to you?
Well, because it was important to them. Commissioner Bauer really could detail, she spent hours and hours with them on all the tax provisions, and we've expressed very clearly, directly, our objection to this and desire to have it removed. But they write the bill, and they control ultimately what's in it and not in it, and they were insistent on this. Was a very, very important provision for them. And again, I've heard second-hand, third-hand reports as to why, so I'm not going to repeat unfounded rumors, but there was obviously very, very strong incentive on their part to keep this in regardless.
You agreed on this at some point in negotiations. Was it in the back of your mind that you might have an out, like the line item vetoes, to bring this issue back to the table? Had that coalesced in your mind yet, that idea?
It had not coalesced in my mind at that point.
Governor,
Didn't coalesce until after I saw what they did with the Department of Revenue and some of the other antics.
you say they're caving into big tobacco. They claim on the inflator issue anyway that it's principle. They don't like any tax to be just indexed to inflation. The cigar thing might be a different deal, but do you look at them differently, their rationale for these two?
Well, I think their rationale is very different. I mean, having a tax increase with inflation is common. It's not absolute, but as I said, the indexing of the brackets, tax brackets themselves. I mean, I don't want to put Commissioner Bauer on the spot, but there are numerous other tax provisions. You're willing to be on the spot?
Good morning, Cynthia Bowerly, Department of Revenue. As the governor said, adjusting our taxes for real-time dollars and adjusting over time is not unique to the cigarette inflator issue. As the governor said, income tax brackets change over time. Other credits, for example, the thresholds for the income level at which you can claim those change over time, including things like the child dependent care credit. And of course, the purpose of that is to make sure that our tax system is keeping up with sort of the real value of dollar. And that's why this is tobacco change is so important, because without that indexing in there, over time, the price of cigarettes stays flat, and that, of course, as our buying power increases over a decade, they become more affordable for kids and for others who are smoking.
Was there any discussion during session about getting rid of those other inflators?
Not to my knowledge.
One of Republicans' main arguments on this is that the tobacco tax, is one of the most regressive. It goes right against the folks that the governor says he wants to help. How do you respond to that?
We would be happy to continue the talk about how progressive our state's income tax has become under the governor's leadership, including with the addition of the fourth tier. As you might also, as you're talking with members about regressivity and progressivity, the estate tax is one of the things that will make our system more regressive as a single item than any other item. And so while, of course, we are always concerned about making sure that we are moving our tax system towards a progressive state, as we've discussed here today, there are other significant benefits to making sure that tobacco prices stay in a place where they reduce the incentive for smoking. So I think that is a trade-off here. And certainly, the governor has expressed concern about regressivity and has made significant strides to make sure. He's been a leader on making our system more progressive.
Any questions of the stars of the show here? Send them down to fresh air.
I would like to just, I would like to respond to that regressive as, the tax issue. There are other issues related, particularly I love the fact that when the governor advanced the tobacco tax, he led with health back in 2013, because this is a health issue. And tobacco use is a regressive, actually a regressive addiction. It really impacts low income and low education folks and populations of color. As Trey identified, that the tobacco industry is purposely targeting lower income populations for addiction. And it really, if we can, and I don't know of anybody in that community who generally says we want to have more and more people addicted. So they really get support from low income populations, populations of colored American Indians who see this as a way of actually putting more money into their pockets and improving their health long term.
Trey, you've been spearheading this since you were 11 years old?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that's really, you want to tell people what you've been doing? Not really, but go ahead.
Well, I think this might be my second time speaking down at the Capitol. I think in the past I spoke in front of the Senate about the tax, and yeah. Sorry, I'm not really good on the spot, y'all.
You're great.
Yeah, I've been doing this since, like I said, like Governor said, since I was 11. And I think the first time I went in front of people to testify was at City Hall for the council members.
Very good. Thank you. Anyone else want to add anything?
If we could have Megan up for a minute. I'm an Irondale grad, so I hope you'll still take a question from me.
That's totally fine.
I remember way back, when I was in school, in high school, and the pressure to be cool and all those kinds of things. I mean, does making these cigarettes, kids are working and doing all these kinds of things now, so they got money coming in. I mean, does raising the cigarette tax a little bit every year, does it really cut this off or not?
Yes, it really does, because I know that like most of my friends, they do have jobs, but it's minimum wage, and they use that money, they want to buy food, they want to buy like cool stuff, but they also do want to buy tobacco products. And since the tobacco industry is targeting youth so much, that's what they end up eventually doing, because everybody else is doing it. It's a whole pressure kind of thing. So I think that by raising the taxes and by keeping the taxes high, and that way like people won't be as focused on trying to buy tobacco products, because less and less people will be doing it because it's so expensive. So.
Why don't we cut it off here, and we'll let you go downstairs and enjoy yourselves. I'll be down in just a minute. Thank you very much. You guys are great. Thank you. Thank you. Yay. Anyone who's here with them is welcome to join us downstairs until the air runs out in that room too, but come on down.
Governor, is cigarette smuggling a direct result of this tax, and do you have any concern about that?
Well, I mean, people who don't want to pay any taxes for whatever reason are willing to do something illegal to avoid it. I mean, I suppose the differential has a very marginal effect, but people who are engaged in illegal activity so they can pay no taxes are always going to object to a tax at any level, the previous level or currently. So I don't subscribe to that view that it's driving people to do something illegal that they wouldn't be doing otherwise.
The idea of the Department of Revenue being potential collateral damage if you had vetoed the bill, but doesn't the same apply to your veto of the legislature? Aren't there a lot of employees over there whose jobs and paychecks are at risk with this funding in limbo?
Well, I regret the effect on staff very, very much. I mean, I went through watching thousands of very dedicated state employees, up against the brink of the shutdown and then the actual shutdown in 2011. And you know, it's within the power of the legislative leaders, their leaders, to remedy that in short order by coming back and doing the right thing in terms of the state of Minnesota and also the right thing in terms of their employees.
Have you had any conversations with legislative leaders that indicate that they're willing to come back to the table at all?
Well, they're coming back, what we set for Tuesday at 9? Is that, no? We're trying to get 6 different schedules synchronized, so, but we're in conversation with them about, or their staffs about the meeting for next week.
To you that they're proceeding still with their preparations for a lawsuit?
I'm not going to comment. I only know what I see in the media, hear,
Have you been served
read.
papers on that lawsuit?
I'm sorry?
Have you been served papers?
No?
You in that legal matter should it come to pass, and who gave you legal advice before you did your line item veto that's now being called unconstitutional?
Well, my general counsel gave me legal advice before the action. We've had preliminary conversations, but again, a lawsuit has not been filed, and I'm much more focused, and I've been, as you know, traveling around the state, and I'll continue next week to travel to focus public attention on the reasons for the action I took, and this being one of them.
Sorry, preliminary conversations on who would represent you?
Yeah, very, very preliminary, yes.
Has that been with the AG's office, or
I'm
have
not
you
going
looked
to
at
comment any
outside
further.
counsel?
We don't have a lawsuit now. We're not preparing for a lawsuit in any formal way, and we'll see.
You said in Rochester and Mankato the other day, you're confident of your legal position on this. Are you concerned, however, if you did prevail, the precedent that would set for future governors, whether they be Republican, Democrat, or independent, and their ability, when they don't like something the legislature has done, to just line item them out of existence or nearly out of existence?
Well, you know, there should be a balance. The legislature, you know, appropriates money or withholds money from executive branch agencies. So this separation of powers, I totally respect separation of powers, but you know, we all have just the powers that the Constitution assigns to us, and the Constitution assigned this power of a line item veto to me. It assigned to the legislature the authority to set budgets, to cut off budgets, not to fund agencies, as they've also done to the courts. So I mean, to me, it's a, you know, it's an even playing field. It's not even because the Constitution and subsequent law gives different prerogatives to different entities. But to me, it's all consistent with what the Minnesota Constitution has established and the laws that have followed it. And if somebody wants to create a different environment, the legislature can act accordingly.
Is it a dangerous precedent, do you think?
I don't think so.
Even though other governors could do this, it could become routine practice.
I can't predict the future. I just know that in this instance, it's something I take very seriously. It's very serious action, but the consequences for Minnesota's fiscal stability over the next decade and beyond are extremely serious, and we've seen what happened the previous decade when the state did not have the fiscal stability necessary to weather a recession, and I mean, the consequences of that were horrific, including for many thousands of state employees who were involuntarily laid off in 2011. So, I mean, I've lived through this. I know what this is like. I know how horrific. That's one of the reasons that I agreed to and signed the budget bills, because I realized that otherwise everybody in state government would be put at risk. All the services would be at risk. The constituents, as I've said before, the DNR would have had to rescind, to cancel the campground and park reservations and not take new ones. I mean, this would have, once again, have affected very destructively a lot of Minnesotans' lives. So I signed those bills to protect the services that Minnesota state government provides. And, you know, again, they have an opportunity to remedy this and could do so next week, and we'd be resolved to this.
Isn't the time to handle these disputes in negotiations, not after the budget bills have been passed, and particularly not after you've signed those budget bills into law?
Well, you know, each legislature is different. I can't predict what the future will be. I mean, you know, legislative leaders who have the power to write bills and know that budget bills have to be signed or the agencies and the services are struck down, take advantage of that and insert a lot of policy measures into these bills that have no reason to be there. And, arguably violate the single subject law provision in the Constitution, but that's somebody else's court case for another day. But, I think they've taken extreme advantage of that reality, and that will see something that future legislatures should properly take into account.
Senator Marty is contemplating a lawsuit, isn't filed yet, but he's contemplating a lawsuit on single subject grounds. Some people are saying that's a quixotic from John Marty request, another one. Some scholars, though, think that if that goes forward in combination with the GOP lawsuit, that the courts might actually tackle the single subject once and for all. My question to you is, do you have hopes that the courts will settle that issue?
I haven't. I know there was previous. I know cursory way there's a previous lawsuit on that subject. I haven't followed that in any detail. I'm not qualified to comment. I don't know what.
Just to the general question, do you hope the court will tackle that issue?
Well, I can't say because, again, I don't know what the lawsuit is. It hasn't been filed. I don't know what the, I think it's as a matter of policy, not judiciary, but as a matter of policy and public integrity, I think that the legislature ought to look at it, but the legislature's not good at self-policing, so it may require somebody else to take a look at it.
Governor,
Along the same line of what my colleague was asking, do you think that the single subject dispute may give you some leverage from a legal sense as this proceeds down to possibly back some of these policy provisions out of the bill if you don't prevail in
you guys are all just focused on the legal technicalities and the chess game it involves. I'm not engaged in that right now at all. I'm not a lawyer. I haven't had substantive discussions with any lawyer about this except my general counsel. I'm not qualified to say this, that, or the other. I'd like to see this resolved through negotiations. That's why we're working to set up the meeting. I want them to explain to Minnesotans why eliminating $1 billion in tax revenue for the state is healthy for the state of Minnesota. Why freezing tobacco taxes is healthy for the state of Minnesota. Why freezing the CI, which is a big driving force of the $5 billion total, is a bill over $1 billion. Why are these policies good for Minnesota? And that's where I think the focus ought to be.
issue of special session. Last week you laid out 5 conditions that you want attached to discussion of calling the legislature back. Are you firm in those 5, or is there flexibility? Are you willing to?
I'm not going to start negotiating here with myself. We'll see what unfolds. But there are 5 requirements, so we'll start with that.
Governor, just real quickly on another topic, any concern that no changes were made to the stadium authority? And is it true that your administration stood in the way and threatened to veto the bill?
No, that is not true. And that is a scurrilous lie. And whoever's spreading that is spreading a falsehood. That bill collapsed because the House author was so intransigent that the Senate author decided not to proceed with the bill. We had nothing to do with that. We provided factual information throughout. Commissioner Franz testified that some of the consequences in that bill, it's very poorly, the House version, very poorly thought through. It would really affect the authority's finances. It was, I don't know what the justification for it was, but we did not in any way stand in the way. We watched it. It reached a point where it could go to conference committee. It didn't. That's the legislative prerogative. They had a lot of issues they're dealing with. We did not in any way interfere with that or attempt to stop that or block it. We were prepared for it to go ahead. We were prepared to go into the conference committee, as Commissioner Franz did once initially, to try to make it a workable bill. And it's just really disturbing that somebody's promulgating that lie. It's a lie that we tried to block it or stop it. It's just not true. Okay. Thank you.